Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Newly elected British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has made his first speech as leader outside 10 Downing Street after his Labour Party won the national election with a huge majority. A large crowd of cheering aides and supporters greeted Starmer after he formally accepted the King's invitation to form a government. His first address made the case for moderate politics to repair voters' broken trust. The Labour Party surged to a landslide victory in the parliamentary election, ending 14 years of often tumultuous Conservative government.
Our country has voted decisively for change, for national renewal and a return of politics to public service. When the gap between the sacrifices made by people and the service they receive from politicians grows this big, it leads to a weariness in the heart of a nation, a draining away of the hope, the spirit, the belief in a better future, that we need to move forward together. Now, this wound, this lack of trust, can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. But we can make a start today with the simple acknowledgement that public service is a privilege and that your government should treat every single person in this country with respect. If you voted Labour yesterday, we will carry the responsibility of your trust as we rebuild our country. But whether you voted Labour or not, in fact, especially if you did not, I say to you directly, my government will serve you. Politics can be a force for good. We will show that. We've changed the Labour Party, returned it to service, and that is how we will govern. Country first, party second. Yet, if I'm honest, service is merely a precondition of hope, and it is surely clear to everyone that our country needs a bigger reset, a rediscovery of who we are, because no matter how fierce the storms of history, one of the great strengths of this nation has always been our ability to navigate a way to calmer waters. And yet this depends upon politicians, particularly those who stand for stability and moderation, as I do, recognizing when we must change course. For too long now, we've turned a blind eye as millions slid into greater insecurity. Nurses, builders, drivers, carers, people doing the right thing, working harder every day, recognised at moments like this before, yet as soon as the cameras stop rolling, their lives are ignored.
Former Conservative British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has left Downing Street for the last time after the Labour Party's landslide election victory. Sunak says he'll resign as Conservative leader once arrangements are in place for his successor. He has addressed the nation outside 10 Downing Street as part of the transfer of power to Keir Starmer.
Following this result, I will step down as party leader, not immediately, but once the formal arrangements for selecting my successor are in place. It is important that after 14 years in government, the Conservative Party rebuilds, but also that it takes up its crucial role in opposition professionally and effectively. When I first stood here as your Prime Minister, I told you the most important task I had was to return stability to our economy. Inflation is back to target, mortgage rates are falling, and growth has returned. We have enhanced our standing in the world, rebuilding relations with allies, leading global efforts to support Ukraine, and becoming the home of a new generation of transformative technologies. And our United Kingdom is stronger too, with the Windsor Framework, devolution restored in Northern Ireland, and our unions strengthened. I'm proud of those achievements. I believe this country is safer, stronger, and more secure than it was 20 months ago. And it is more prosperous, fairer, and resilient than it was in 2010.
All right, we cross live now to SABC News correspondent John Beaver, who's in London for us. John, so there's a new sheriff at 10 Downing Street. The polls we unpacked were correct. What has been the sentiment of ordinary citizens on the electoral outcome?
Well, I think for those who support Labour, then of course they are delighted by this outcome, and they say that this large majority provides the Labour Party with the mandate they need to implement their policies that they discussed in their manifesto. So I think that is something that Labour supporters are very keen to point out. Of course, those who don't support Labour have said actually a large part of this vote here in the UK was a vote against the Conservative Party, that this was people voting for anyone other than the Conservatives because they were fed up with the Conservatives after 14 years of power and the issues that we have in the UK, whether that's the economy or the high cost of living or a lack of perceived lack of investment in public services such as the NHS. So I think depending on where you are on the political spectrum and who you voted for, then obviously you have very... But the fact of the matter is that the Labour Party have got this sizable majority, this landslide as it's being called, the kind of landslide that hasn't been seen since Tony Blair came to power in 1997. And so Labour realised that they are in this very strong position. Here in the Houses of Parliament behind me, they are going to have the MPs they need to pass the laws that they want, but they are going to have to get a move on because there are a big number of issues facing the UK and facing the world as well, and obviously the UK keen to play a part in those.
All right, so what we're seeing here is that Labour has benefited from some sort of a grievance vote, that really what the electorate wanted was for Conservative to change its ways, but it didn't, and now they gave the vote to the Labour. But on the Prime Minister Starmer, he gave his first address to the nation today, speaking of a return of politics of public service. Talk us through that address.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? I think this was Keir Starmer keen to say that they were working hard for the British people. He was keen to put the British people at the heart of this after what some would say has been a difficult time for politicians because of all the various scandals and issues that have gone on, whether that's the Partygate scandal during the COVID lockdown, the instability at the top of the Conservative Party with a number of prime ministers in a very short space of time, to going back to what we hear today, all about this being public service and the politicians having to work for people, and that the politicians have to listen to everyone, not just the people who voted for them, but they've got to listen to all to make sure that they can provide the best for the UK. So it was an interesting take on that in terms of hearing from Keir Starmer in terms of what he was trying to set out, and this kind of very definite idea that it is the people that are in charge and the politicians are working hard to help them. That is certainly the feeling I feel that he was trying to get across.
Then to former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, very gracious in his defeat, saying today power is changing hands peacefully, and adding that he takes full responsibility for the Conservative Party's loss. What more did he have to say in his final address at Downing Street?
Yeah, I think it was a very different former Prime Minister, wasn't it, when he was talking compared to the election campaign. Over the last 6 weeks, he'd been trying to say to people that actually things were starting to improve and that they needed to back the Conservatives. They needed to make sure that actually it was the Conservatives who would be able to keep turning the economy around, to keep getting things back on track. And then when he saw that that message had not landed at all, interesting to note as well that the opinion polls throughout this 6-week election campaign, a very long election campaign compared to normal, which is normally more like a month here, this 6-week campaign, the opinion polls only changed by a percentage point here or there. So very interesting that he was magnanimous, in defeat, was very much encouraging and hopeful that his successor was going to do a good job for the country. Very keen to point out to everyone that politics, again, is meant to help people, and certainly that's something he tried to do. So I think the the way he handled his exit has won him some friends from both sides of the political spectrum.
John Beaver, you're quite right on the opinion polls. They've been very accurate, honestly, unbelievable. But thank you very much for your time. That was SABC News correspondent John Beaver coming to us live from the United Kingdom.